Hello dear student, welcome to the Pathshala in the Department of Physics, Shri RLT College of Science, Akola. This is our lecture number 9 of unit number 3rd, Atomic and Molecular Spectroscopy, and in this lecture we will discuss about the optical spectra. So when the electromagnetic radiation interact with the matter, energy of radiation is absorbed or emitted by the matter. The systematic arrangement of emitted radiation or absorbed radiation according to the wavelength, frequency or wave number is known as spectrum. इसका मतलब हुआ कि अगर कोई मटेरियल है either in the form of solid, liquid and gases, this material absorb or emit the radiation which is incident on it. We say as a matter, material, or we say as a matter, this matter absorb or emit the radiation, and this material absorb or emit the radiation, electromagnetic radiation. Okay, if the radiation is absorbed or emit, this absorption or emitted radiation arrange in accordance with the wavelength or frequency or wave number, and this is called as spectra. This is a basic definition. Okay, and now there are two types of spectrum: emission spectrum and absorption spectrum. So basically optical spectra starting from gamma rays, X-rays, starting from gamma rays into the infrared. Okay, in between from gamma rays, X-rays, ultraviolet, visible and infrared. Okay, this all radiation belongs to the optical spectra. So basically the spectra is at two types: emission spectra and absorption spectrum. What is emission spectrum? The emission spectrum is produced when a source of light is directly examined by the spectroscope. Okay, so for example, hydrogen discharge tube is there, and hydrogen discharge tube is emitted the radiation which with this spectrum can observe by using the spectroscope. Okay, so this spectra is called as emission spectra. Emitted by the source of light is called as emitted spectrum. For example, here we consider A, the heated bulk matters such as filament of lamp, mouth of hot furnace, molten gas, hot iron, etc. emit the emission spectrum. These are the example of emission spectrum. Or the most famous is the hydrogen atom spectrum. This hydrogen atom spectrum is a spectra of emission. Everybody know. So once again, emission spectra are further classified into the three types: continuous emission spectrum, line emission spectrum and band emission spectrum. What is the difference between these three? First, here we see the continuous emission spectrum. When a matter is bulk, is heated, emits continuous spectrum. When light from a hot solid such as a tungsten filament, hot iron, etc. is sent through the prism, spectrum of kind is produced. In this spectrum, intensity is dependent on the temperature and body itself. So the diagram shows the continuous emission spectrum. Okay. Second is line emission spectrum. When an emission spectrum contains a series of fine sharp lines having dark space in a between, it is called line emission spectrum. Such a spectrum is obtained when matter is atomic state is excited. Therefore, it is also called atomic spectrum. This diagram shows the emission line spectrum. And third one is the band emission spectrum. If the emission spectrum has a colored band separated by the dark space on two sides, the spectrum is called as band spectrum. This spectrum is produced when matter is molecular state is excited. Therefore, it is also called as molecular spectrum. So molecular spectrum is always a band emission spectrum. This is all about the emission spectra. Now second is absorption spectrum, just go to the reverse with this emission spectrum. When the light from source of continuous spectrum is passed through an absorbing material, certain radiation are found missing. This missing radiation appear as a line or bands in the spectrum of emergent light. Such a spectrum is called as absorption spectrum. Here we see the example. The continuous absorption spectrum is obtained by putting a pure lead glass in the path of light from continuous sources. In this case, red glass absorbs every radiation except red. It means that all the absorption which is incident on the red glass is absorbed and only pass the red light. So the absorption is all other wavelength except red. Second example is by putting the sodium vapor in the path of continuous light, two dark sodium lines D1 and D2 are obtained on the bright background. And third one is by putting iodine vapor in the path of continuous light, dark iodine lines are obtained on the bright background. So once again, absorption spectra are further classified into three types: continuous absorption spectrum, line absorption spectrum, and band absorption spectrum. So continuous absorption spectrum. The continuous absorption spectrum is obtained when a body absorbs continuous range of wavelength without any gap. For example, when the light from an electric lamp is passed through the violet gases, it absorbs all visible light except violet. The figure show here, this is all visible light absorb only transmit the violet, not absorb violet. Okay, this is a continuous absorption spectrum. Second is line absorption spectrum. The line absorption spectrum is produced when the matter absorbs radiation of particular wavelength. Such a spectrum is obtained when absorbing a medium is in atomic state. For example, when the light is passed through the sodium vapor, in its path, two dark sodium lines D1 and D2 are obtained on the bright background. Okay, and the third is band absorption spectrum. The absorption spectrum is produced when matter absorbs a band of wavelength from incident radiation. This spectrum is produced when absorbing material is in molecular state. Okay, so basically this spectrum is two types: emission and absorption spectrum. Emission spectrum, the light is emitted; absorption spectrum, light is absorbed. So this is all about the emission optical spectrum. So thank you very much for watching this video.